Hi, everybody. This is Bob Ose, and this is our Friday community gathering, Theater Resources Unlimited. We started this back in April 17th. Um, After I got over the panic of thinking that I was going to have to close my company, and after I stopped saying, I can't do virtual, I can't do Zoom, I can't do any of this, I don't know how to do it. Well, when life hands you something like this, you have to make the best of it. So I made a pivot to Zoom. I decided to see if people might feel a little less lonely and feel a little bit more part of a community if I had everybody get together here in this Zoom room. And we've been doing it 34 consecutive weeks. I took off 2 weeks. I took off Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Call me crazy. And we're back today, and we're back with I just have to acknowledge that this week has been really emotionally disturbing for most of us, if not all of us. And we've seen things in our political, in DC that we never thought we would see in our lifetimes. We know how we feel about it. I'm sure everybody has a slightly different feeling about what's going on. All I can say is I'm holding on to hope that things will be better and things will be restored to something that resembles normal. We're also in a pandemic, so we're not quite near normal yet, but hopefully we'll get there, and hopefully we will make some progress moving forward in the next couple months and see a world that we have a little bit more comfort viewing than we have the one that we're viewing now. So that's it. I just have to acknowledge it because it's happening. That said, we're here at TRU in the community gathering to gather as artists, to gather as people that are in a position to sort of show other people the world as we see it or the way that we know it. And we have the possibility of changing minds or at least engaging people in other points of view through theater. So that's who we are. That's what we do. We make theater. We write about people. We write about the human race, and hopefully we help people see it in useful ways. That said, we're going to talk about the Great American Trailer Park Musical today.
What a great segue.
Great segue. It's the perfect segue. Speaking about seeing the world, I want you to meet Betsy, Kelso, and David Nehls, who are the writers of the Great American Trailer Park Musical. And I want to actually I don't tell them that we're going to do this, but I want to go on the journey from way back when we first met, because we offered you one of the first, it wasn't the first, but it was one of the first readings that you had of the show. So tell us about how you found TRU and how the reading series helped you, if assuming that it did. I would think that Marvin Krause was some help. So talk about that a little bit and introduce yourselves.
Well, my memory from it is that I think I was working. If anybody remembers the old Carousel Dinner Theater in Akron, Ohio, I was out there musical directing something when we got the information that we were going to do the TRU reading. Because it was such a wonderful bit of information to get while I was stuck out in Akron, Ohio, in some of their housing, and I remember being so excited to come back from that job to step into this particular process in our developmental process, because we had had more than 2 readings. I think we were maybe 4 or 5 readings in.
No, but we've made a rule since then.
Well, but at the time, the first 2 readings we did were so like.
We're not saying they were good.
I mean, and we're not saying they were professional. But we did, because it's part of the development. You can't shirk those first 2 readings where we had a cast of 15. I don't even know. It was absurd. But that was our journey, and it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 readings in that it took on a real sense of a professional piece. and you guys were one of those first professional steps that we took.
So, Betsy, just tell us a little bit about yourself and also about how you found TRU and how you came into the reading series.
So it's been a while. So I'm the book writer for the musical, the librettist, and I'm a writer in general. And I had mostly a comedy background. When I came into this, I had never written anything full length, so it was all educational. And so when David was talking about it was one of the steps, that's what I remember about TRU. It was a very significant step forward. And that's what development is you just keep stepping forward and forward and forward and forward and refining and learning and reacting. And it was an opportunity I remember Marvin and Elaine they brought a director to see it who said, and I remember very, very distinctly, he said, "There's gold here." He had opinions about what he might want to do with it, but he said, "There's gold here." And he was one of the first people. First of all, it was an opportunity for somebody outside of them to endorse it. That's never a bad thing. And though he didn't end up being somebody who was there for the long haul, it was a step forward and an opportunity to share the piece with. There's something about the formality, like David said, we did our own readings before, we put them together, friends, family, and it's a way to kind of work things out, play around a little bit. TRU offered us, I think, our first structured evening that was an opportunity to open it up to more people. And I think that's something that's really significant is you have your phase, you have your inner circle of friends and family and colleagues and peers. You need that. It's safe. It's part of your writing process. And then there are opportunities to open it up wider, which is always a risk, but always an opportunity.
What I want people to understand, because not everybody knows us and knows our series, more than half the room actually only knows the TRU Community Gathering at this point. So I'm hoping that everybody's going to find more things about TRU that they're going to participate in. We set this up so that we do a reading. We require that it be done in 90 minutes, and we invite an industry panel to come back and afterwards and talk about the development of the piece. And Marvin was on your panel, right? You brought Marvin in to be. You knew Marvin before TRU, right?
I think so, right, David?
It was Elaine
yeah.
who was really the driving force, and then she brought Marvin in.
And this is Marvin Krause. Marvin Krause is a little bit of a legend for those of you who don't know him. He's just a producer. Google Marvin. I didn't come prepared with his credits, but he was a very active theater producer, and I think general manager.
He was.
Yes, both of those.
And by the time he had worked with us, he had had a stroke. So I think some of his zip had been taken away, but there were these moments.
None of his sharpness was taken away. he was present.
Like you'd turn around and, Marvin was quiet at the time, and you'd turn, like when we were doing a workshop with him at one point, he had one of the girls' wigs on, just sitting there.
I forgot about that.
Good old Marvin. He was a great guy.
And Elaine ended up being a producer, an investor on our off-Broadway production. So she remained part of our trailer park family after Marvin passed.
So talk a little bit about how you went from the TRU reading. I know there were a lot of steps, but some of the steps that finally led to the off-Broadway production.
I will say, because I know that part of what we talk about here with this community is self-producing. And the wonderful thing about distance, of course, is like, I'm going to forget a million details. I'm going to forget a million steps, but I'm going to remember the benchmarks. And one of the benchmarks for us that got us to off-Broadway, it was timing and it was opportunity. It was the New York Musical Theater Festival. It was the first year of the New York Musical Theater Festival. We were a part of it. And that opened us up to have more people see it. But significantly, that coincided in 2004 with the opening of what was then called Dodger Stages. It then became New World Stages. They had a $3 movie theater at 50th Street. They turned it into an off-Broadway house with, I think, 4 or 5 theaters. That enabled us, Altar Boys, a number of shows to have a home, because off-Broadway in New York, it's very limited in terms of how many houses. And if you have a cast of 7 like we did, you need a pretty big house. So timing favors timing, however you want to say it. New York Musical Theater Festival coinciding with the opening of Dodger Stages was a big part of how we were able to take that next big step. But what I want to say about self-producing is that we self-produced that. Had we not, if we had just lived in book form and demo CD form, I don't think we ever would have gotten there. We had to put it on its feet ourselves, show people what we thought it could be, flaws and all, our point of view. And it was a lot of work, but it was really worth it because we were able to say, this is what it is. This is what we mean. What do you think?
But did you self-produce it at New World Stages?
No.
You're talking about the Nymph.
Yeah,
the
Nymph.
Correct. Correct.
You know, we had that I shouldn't say little. We had that support of Nymph, but we were out there marketing. I remember we had little stickers that said trailerparkmusical.com, and we would go on the subway and just put them on. We were kind of ghetto about it, but it was super fun, and we had moxie, I guess is what you want to say.
You know, and there was a precedent for what you did, and it's a show called Nonsense with Danny Goggins. He basically did the same thing. Yeah. He was the force that got that show up and running.
And there is this kind of demented energy, this almost blind drive that you have to have, where you want to get the word out, and it takes a lot of hope and energy, and sometimes putting some blinders on.
Yeah, you have to not know better.
Exactly.
In a way,
that's youthful spirit, and I do remember that time as being very spirited and very energized. And David and I will both agree there are always trade-offs when other people come in and other investors come in. You become partners. It takes on a different form. You have to appeal to a broader audience. You're looking at longevity. There's something special about that time where it was just us, because everything was sort of surprising and of the moment and kind of magic, and it was almost like a pleasant surprise. And I think part of it was us kind of going into it. I had already relocated to LA at the time, and we kind of had this idea of like, you know what? We'd already been through so much with it, our own readings, our TRU reading, our a couple of different directors, a couple of different producers, promises made, promises kept, promises broken, the whole journey. And I think we were both at this point where we're like, you know what? Let's just go for it. We'll do it our way. And if everybody hates it, fine. We'll put it on the shelf. And maybe someday after we do other things on our own, we'll come back to it. And I feel like there is something to be said for, and I have to learn this over and over again in my life, is going into things with not no expectations, but the open to whatever happens. And we really threw ourselves at it with determination, focus, and intention. But I think the openness of, hey, who the hell knows what this is going to be? Who the hell knows if this is going to be anything? And there's something so great and magical about being in that space. It's so hard to be in that space in life. And when you get there, I think that's when you can really open yourself up more to your marketing ideas, your creative ideas, and all that good stuff that you need.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I seem to remember that after you did your reading with TRU, I got an email from you saying we cut the cast down.
Yeah.
What
We had cut it down before TRU.
No, but you know what I remember? You're right, David. This was like we went from 6 to 5, I think. We combined Arlene and Darlene because we had 6. We had this Greek chorus of Trailer Park Housewives, and it was 6 of them. To be fair, they weren't all distinct enough. And we were also told by learned producers like the Krauses, like, you're never going to get this produced with this big a cast off Broadway. It's way too expensive. And then we went from 6 to 5 at the TRU reading because we combined 2 characters that really were obviously not distinct enough. And then after TRU, I want to say perhaps that's when we had that director come in. I don't remember. We had more of a solidified grown-up team. And that's when we all kind of put our heads together and said, okay, if we're really going to be serious about this, you got to trim the fat and you got to make it producible. And then we went from 5, I think, David, to 3 of those.
That's correct. Yep.
Housewives, yeah. And that ended up being kind of the sweet spot. And you want lean anyway, even if you have all the money in the world, you want every character to be distinct and have a good reason for being there.
So let me ask you this, because I think that this got a little fuzzy. You're not saying that the whole cast went from a cast of 6 to 5, or
No, sorry.
Our cast is a very interesting. It's like a Greek structure. So you've got your chorus of narrators, and then you have your principal characters. So we had 4 principals, and at one time we had 6 in our as our narrators.
Yeah,
so
now that's how I remember it. It went from 10 to 9, not from 6 to 5.
Right.
And as the composer and lyricist, I had written these like expansive numbers that I was so in love with, because you're in love with your own work. And it was the first time that I really was able to focus as an outside eye on my own work and be like, yeah, that's right. This is too fatty. This needs to be trimmed, and this needs to be much more pointed and funnier. Quite frankly, when you trim the fat, it's funnier.
So tell me how you found, or how a producer found you, and how you made the move to off-Broadway.
It was Nymph. So, Jean Domanian.
How did we know Jean? Did I know Jean?
Yeah, because you were doing. Betsy was part, if I can speak for you, Betsy was part of a comedy group called the Shirley Chicken Pants Players, who were hilarious. And Jean Domanian, who is a very well-known and respected producer, was following the Shirley Chicken Pants Players. And I guess she came to see a reading that we had done. I don't think it was the TRU one. It might have been after.
She was familiar with the show. And I remember specifically the day she came to see the show at Nymph, because I think we were down a crew person, so I was filling in backstage. And at intermission, I went out to say hi to her. I remember I sat with her, and she turned to me and she said, "This is fun." And she had 2 younger folks working for her, who had come to a lot of my sketch shows, and we'd become close, and they were creative writing people too. And it opened up. We were in an enviable position. Nymph really, this is an example of how hype works and how things take on a life of their own. We really did generate a lot of buzz, and we were one of the latter shows to open, and there wasn't anything quite like us, I think, at the festival. And there was just a lot of positive word of mouth around the show, and that it was fun and that it was funny. And I remember Leslie Stahl was there, Wayne Brady was there. We started to there was all kinds of like people showing up. It was such a whirlwind. This is so cool. It was like one of the first times we had ever felt, and I think it was because it was produced. It was not it was a produced production. Like it was realized in its form at the time. And that meant that we had a couple of suitors, and we were simultaneously talking to representatives, agents, and lawyers, as well as producers. It wasn't like the whole town, but we had enough bites that we were taking meetings with different people who wanted at it in different ways for different reasons. And one of the reasons we did have a choice between producers for New York. And as I remember it, we chose Jean Domanian, and Jeffrey Richards was also a big, theater guy. Sorry, my computer keeps going to sleep and shutting off my screen.
We can see you.
Thank you. Good. We felt they really had the connections and the access to the capital that it was going to take to produce this and get it off the ground and give it a life beyond New York, because you never know how long New York's going to last. And yeah, it would have been great if we became the Stomp of trailer park musicals and ran forever. But what we needed was to run for X amount of time so that it could be licensed and run, and tour and run in different places. And that's the life it's really had. And that's where it has really connected. And to bring it full circle back to what you were saying in the beginning, Bob, we are very proud that we have connected with audiences in Texas and Florida and Arkansas and all these other smaller markets I mean, I've seen people on Facebook with whom I've connected who've done the show, very different political views from me, very different life experiences, who have developed an affinity for the show and the experience they had doing the show. And that's where we made a strategic choice to go with a producer that could get it done so that it could be done everywhere else.
And there's something to be said about that template production. This created the actual template for what people then take and produce of their own vision, but it makes the regional market that much more accessible, and it makes the regional market get excited because you're giving them a real base product. And that's been so illuminating, and then led the way to writing a sequel to the show.
So we're going to get to that in a second. I want to actually let everybody know that if you open up your participants window, there's a virtual hand raise. So if there are comments or questions that you have that you want to ask during this interview here, just raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you. Because I think
I one thing too, Bob, about reading versus production is that when NIMF rolled around, the requirement was pieces that had never actually been produced but had been developed, and that's where readings like TRU are an important stepping stone, is that you want that kind of development before you go ahead and put it on its feet. And it was very much right place, right time in terms of being ready to put it on its feet. I don't know that we would have been had we not had those series of readings.
By the way, did you notice I wore a shirt just for you?
I love that shirt, Bob. I wore that same exact style shirt when I conducted a production of Das Barbecue. You're welcome.
I love Das Barbecue. Great show. So I think that you hit on a couple points. Start with the understanding that a lot of the people in this room are aspiring writers, but all of whom have been salivating through most of this discussion. So they want to know how to do what you've done. So what would, and they need to understand, but you've actually given them a lot of insight about that already. Thank you for letting them know that self-producing is actually a worthy endeavor and can often lead to success. Can you talk about how much were you involved in the decisions that were made once the show was in off-Broadway, or was some of that taken out of your hands by the producing team? And who was reaching out to licensing? Who was creating the licensing? Who was reaching out to the regional theaters? Who was doing all that? Did you have an agent?
That's where it came into being. Our agent Chris Till was instrumental in getting the licensing and reaching out to the first regional theaters that tackled the show.
And everybody always asks me, how do I get an agent?
Oh.
Way you get an agent is you get a production.
Right. Yeah.
I'm listening. You can talk.
But we were interviewing.
I don't like this.
We were interviewing with.
Who doesn't like
She's
it?
working for Parham.
Right.
I don't
Okay.
like it.
Somebody's got to turn their mic off. Somebody's got to turn their mic off.
I mean, there's all kind of liability.
Turn your mic off. Turn your mic off. Okay.
We did though a couple of things. We did do a lot of outreach to regionals that had reached out to us because everything was happening again. Everything was happening at the same time. We didn't go into NIMF with an agent. We came out of NIMF with an agent, and so we were building that relationship coming out of NIMF. And that person, as David said, Chris was also acting as a great advisor to us, as somebody who had been through this with new writers before, new shows, and helping us kind of figure out how to make our decisions moving forward and how licensing works and how to be smart about things. But we also, I remember being in my apartment in LA and sending out a lot of packets to a lot of theaters regional theaters had expressed interest. And we had to tell them, okay, cool, great, hold your horses because we've got to do this off-Broadway production first. We'll keep you posted on licensing. Had we not gone to that, if something had fallen through with off-Broadway, the money didn't come in, whatever, because we still had to jump through hoops. We had to do more readings, more presentations so that Gene and Jeffrey could ask all their moneyed friends to put their money in. We had to keep showing up and keep refining and keep doing and keep selling and keep trying. And, you're hat in hand until that curtain goes up. And then you're still hat in hand because you still
I have a question for you about
keep
that.
going.
I have a question. Once you got into the reality.
Wait, what were you saying, Bob?
So once you get into the reality of having a producer working on this, how close was the cost of your show to what you imagined it would be before, as the self-producers?
Uh,
Close, I think.
I think it was more expensive than I thought it should have been.
It was about, it was more than, it was budgeted a certain way. Most people seem to agree on what the budget would be. And it was more than, it ended up being more than that simply because I think everything ends up being more. It wasn't crazy more though. It wasn't twice
Okay.
as much.
So you weren't completely out of the ball. A lot of writers don't know what their shows would cost.
Well, I think we were told. I don't
Yeah.
think, in terms of if you're asking what we thought, like, I don't think I had a clue.
Oh, okay.
The number they told
Yeah, I think we had so many meetings with people who would open up the spreadsheet and say, just so you know, this is how it works. This is what we're thinking. And we were like, oh, okay, that sounds right. And they were all kind of consistent. But in terms of what I might have thought, gosh, I don't know that I would have known, between marketing and advertising and just what it really costs to do a union show and weekly running costs and box office and administration and general management and
marketing.
It's quite a lot. Yeah, a lot that I wouldn't have known or been able to budget. To this day, I don't think I'm that good at.
And honestly, when you get a producer like Gene and Jeffrey, and they're getting ready to take the reins, you have to have an element of trust with these people because they're going to be hiring the people who know how to do the stuff that we were doing ourselves at NYMF, So they don't have somebody running around on the subway with little trailer park stickers.
Well, I want to just editorialize for a second, a little bit. I think it's very healthy for writers to learn what things cost and have some idea. It helps you when you're conceiving your show to understand when you might be going too far, when this might not be practical. So we actually we're very much in favor. Now, a lot of people take the position that our artists don't need to know all this, but TRU does not take that position. We take the position that it does not hurt for an artist to understand the business that they're working in.
Because then you're in tech and you're needing to do rewrites, and when you're getting these rewrites, you can't be rewriting scenes with new scenic elements. I mean, you've got to be smart about the budget. You've got to be smart about all the business elements that are taking place at the same time that you are trying to get the curtain open on opening night.
Yeah,
and before you get to that point, you want to create something that is producible. You have to have an ear and an eye to that so that you don't go to the table when you do get noticed, while this is really wonderful, that it's like, oh, and it's doable, especially in theater where you really do have you have real parameters. It's almost harder. It's harder for me to go from like a film TV mindset from theater, because film TV, like, the possibilities are kind of endless, and what you can do now in film and TV is kind of vast, even with an iPhone. But theater is theater, and it's if it's going to be 8 shows a week and it's going to be union, there are, whether, like David said, your scenic elements, your design elements, your wardrobe and wig people. I mean, these are the conversations we did have to start to have with our producers, where they were like, do you need this many wig changes? They wanted to have one costume and wig person, period, backstage. They wanted to have 2 crew people, period, backstage. The reality was we had costume and wig changes in a show that, was small, but that necessitated bringing on another person. And then we had to bring on yet another person, I think, backstage for crew. Those add expenses. So when you're thinking about, you can be creative. We thought we were a cheap show because you could get the costumes at Walmart. We didn't demand, there was no chandelier falling down on the stage or anything. We thought that meant cheap, but it doesn't. It's maintenance as well, and backstage staffing. And I learned through that process that you can definitely underestimate your needs, and one extra costume or wig change can make a big difference.
That's actually exactly the kind of information I like to share with people. I wanted to say I asked people to put up their hand with the virtual hand raise. I didn't realize that the new version of Zoom that I just downloaded has a completely different hand. So I'm looking at this. There is a hand raised. It's just not the hand that I'm used to seeing. So Ned Ginsburg, what did you want to ask? Please, you can come in, or you can just
I'll just talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, so Betsy, I saw it at New World Stages, and I liked it a lot. By the way, it's very, very entertaining. I seem to recall, Betsy, that you were the director of that production, And
Yeah.
were you always wanting to direct it yourself? Was there ever a discussion that or pressure to not direct it, or was that always what you wanted to do?
What happened was, no, we had brought, and I never thought of myself as a director. I had a direct, I've always had a directorial eye. I approach most of what I do, even as a writer, with a directorial sensibility, but it wasn't ever my ambition to direct the show. What happened was we were in that space I talked about where David and I came together, Nymph became an opportunity. We've been through this person, we've been through that person. We said, let's do it ourselves. David, you'll musical direct, I'll direct. That way we'll put up the version we believe in and we'll see what happens. We'll see what people think of it. So it was sort of just like by attrition, I guess, because there was nobody else we had on board at that time. We hadn't thoroughly, completely clicked with the right director in all the development we'd gone through. There was just never that one person. There was always somebody who was adjacent to being right for it. Definitely people that were instructive. Definitely people who were devoted and experienced, people from whom we could learn, but there was always something that was off. And it kind of just became this thing when Nymph rolled around, was like, let's just do it ourselves and then we'll see what happens. And then based on the success of Nymph, the producers were like, we think you've done a great job. Do you want to direct it? And at one point, I think Gene and I had a conversation about me directing versus being in it because I was still performing. And at the time, that kind of hyphen wasn't as much of a thing. I want to think that there was what I'm blanking on the show where the narrator was also the director, or the Lin-Manuel Miranda of it all. Like that kind of hyphen in theater for me I didn't really have a role model for that. Had I had that kind of role model, I might have done that, but then we would have had to hand the reins over to a director and build that relationship from scratch. And I think David and I were a little leery because we had been in bed with directors that some of the relationships were a little tough. And since then we've worked with directors that were amazing. And
may I also say something about this? Your piece it's a piece that requires tone, a certain tone.
Yes,
and not every director is going to be able to achieve that comic tone.
That's exactly it, Bob.
Yeah.
That's it in a much more concise way than I said it.
Yeah, and I think there's another word that really fits our show, and that's authenticity. You can smell the bullshit if it's not authentic, if people aren't really,
pointing to the joke and saying, hey, here comes a joke. Like it's not written for that. And that's where, I felt like my hand was probably the right one to get it off the ground and hand it over.
And also, I want to add that Betsy and I have known each other for many, many years. We met each other in Europe touring with the Rocky Horror Show as actors. So we have done many, a bus and truck moment. We have done like high-end performing together, and we are friends. So to have that ability to go into a large situation, like going into Dodger Stages at the time, knowing our relationship, our way of working, and how well we knew each other, so it was just the right thing to do.
David, a follow-up to you, as I also recall, you were on stage, you were in the band.
Every night.
Did you consider, hey, maybe I should be out in the audience listening and watching?
No, because I was stupid. Now I learned a lot from that particular production, but there's this mindset that I had where I had to be there every night. The show would fall apart it was so stupid. And I had an assistant, and I should have had him play a couple of previews, and I should have gone out and watched the show a couple of times. I never did. So Ned, I was an idiot. But I'm proud of the fact that I played every single show. You never saw a performance of that show without me playing it.
Yeah, you sometimes learn something if you're out in the audience. You learn stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to move us to up a little bit farther to approaching today. Tell us the process of getting from the Great American Trailer Park to the Great American Trailer Park Christmas Musical, and what you're doing and how you had to rethink it for you tell us what's happening with that. So you know what I want you to talk about, right?
Well, it's COVID, right?
Yeah.
And having to think about things online or things about during this pandemic, how we have to adjust. And we're very lucky that we're licensed with Drama Display Service, which I think is now being absorbed by, I can't remember who. It used to be Theatrical, Worldwide Theater, can't remember. But it's, but they had set up in, I think it was April or May, Betsy, right? Where they were setting up a streaming licensing situation where you could still do streaming productions of shows that are licensed by Drama Display Service. So while, we're in the situation that we're in, which is the worst situation ever, there is still ways for them to have their products make money and have the shows be seen. And they had actually given us the option at one point if we wanted to help to alter or rewrite for the internet. That never came up because we actually had 2 live productions this past.
Socially distanced.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
guess.
and everything. I love the picture.
Eventually.
Yeah.
We saw the picture online on Facebook with the masks, and we were like, oh, there's a production happening, because in our conversation with DPS about potentially streaming licenses for theaters that might want to do this, put it up, stream it, for X amount of performances, whatever. We also had an interesting conversation, creative conversation inside that conversation about ways you could tweak it, as David would say, we have an agoraphobic, shut in main character. What an interesting character to have during a pandemic when everybody's shut in and separated and cut off. And you start to think about ways you can take your piece to different places through execution, maybe by not even rewriting a single line. I had seen online there were some people that were doing some really interesting things with distanced performing, not just physical distance, but using different media, multimedia to tell their story and enhance their story in this age where everybody's kind of pulled apart. But as David said, there are a couple of productions that are actually, I guess, just live productions now, I guess. Yeah. Depends on the state, where you can do different things in different states and different comfort levels.
And
did you have to do any? Well, first of all, is it Great American Trailer Park musical or the Great American Trailer Park Christmas musical that is getting the live productions?
The Christmas one.
Christmas, yeah, because of the timing of the this time of year, December.
So tell us what inspired you or what motivated you to write another version of the show that would be a holiday version, other than money.
Well, yes.
Well,
to be honest,
I've got nothing. No, I'm kidding.
Well, there's a theater in Houston, Stages Repertory Theater, that had great success with the first show. And then they do these Christmas panto shows, and they asked me to write a couple of them, so I did. And so I started a relationship with them, and Betsy has a relationship with them as well. And they approached us, hey, would you ever think of doing a holiday version of the Trailer Park Show? Well, and I think we bristled at first, but then the ideas started coming, and it actually moved rather swiftly. And I think we had it done in about 9 months, and it was up and running.
Compared to like the original, it was like such a truncated process.
Well, and think about it. We already knew the characters and the world and the vibe, and this theater was very accommodating, and honestly, we had a little more freedom to be a little weirder. I think the show's a little weirder than the first show, and it's
and to speaking to tone, that's Ken McLaughlin, the producing artistic director at Stages Rep in Houston, also directed the show, and that's an example of somebody who super gets the tone, and you hand it over to him, he just makes it better. And I was the choreographer on it, but it was nice to be able to focus only on writing, and that was important because it was brand new.
So you've been the writer, you've been the director, you've been the choreographer, you've been the self-producer. Did you run the concession stand at any point?
I probably did, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
So I've had my hands on every piece of this, from costuming to props to opening beers for people at NIM to
there you go.
I think I put together all the programs at one point, and like, to your point, Bob, like having done all this stuff, it is kind of great because it is learning, it is skill building, and you will come into the process with anybody with an informed opinion. And, you know, so when you do hand over the reins, you're doing it from an informed place. And I think that that is respected. I think if you can speak the language of different people on your team, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
One thing I lost track of when we were talking about this was the new version of the Christmas musical, was it all new material? Did you you just basically use the same characters?
Nope, just the three girls, just the three housewives. And then there's it's like you're focusing on a new set of trailers, but they're still gossiping.
So when you wrote it, were you at that point, were you writing it thinking of socially distanced performance? I know you said it was interesting because of your characters and agoraphobic, but
yeah, no, that was we built this show and opened it back in 2013, long before the pandemic. It wasn't until this past year that we started having conversations with the licensing house about what could be done now that we're in this mode. And it just so happened that by the time November, December holiday season rolled around, I think there were some looser restrictions on gatherings and made it possible for people to have a live performance.
and there were you had two productions?
That's what we hear.
Okay, so you weren't there, so you don't know enough for me to ask you questions about it.
I've been holed up in this house since March.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. So
Yeah.
let me open it up to the room officially for any questions. Raise a virtual hand, or what do you guys want to know? I mean,
Can I
do
say
not try this at home. But
yeah, I just wanted to mention, because I put a picture in your email, Bob.
Yeah,
That
is this
I
June?
saw the production. Yeah, it's June. I saw the production in San Antonio at the Cameo Theater. Jonathan Pennington, Sean
When was it?
Salazar, and I was there,
Oh, that's excellent.
and I loved
you were
it.
someone in a tree.
I absolutely loved it. So I just wanted to tell you, because I work with them a lot in San Antonio, and it was great.
That's a great job too.
Well, good to hear. Good to hear.
So some of the things that I was hoping to know is whether you, I guess you don't know necessarily what the equity, well, were the equity productions?
I don't think so. And here, and I, in fact, I can guarantee they weren't, because I'm doing some new work that we've been trying to get an equity contract for months.
Because there's some pretty very strict rules.
In fact, down in Houston, they did one of those. Remember, I mentioned the Christmas pantos that I had written. We had done one online this past year, and they did it with a SAG contract, and it was reviving one of the shows that we had written, rewritten.
Okay,
And,
so
yeah.
No, go continue.
Well, and the SAG contract, while it is stringent, it is very intense. It was manageable, and we actually got a wonderful product out of it. And they'd have this panto tradition that they've had for 15 years at this theater. So to be able to dive into something that is rather expansive and intimidating, the SAG contract really did seem to negotiate it very well. Equity has been wonderful in communication with this thing that I actually start rehearsals for on Monday, but we're not going to get that contract. It's going to wind up not being a contract. And it's a reading that we're going to do online, but it's frustrating.
We're doing because of the SAG contract versus the equity contract and all the confusion, we're doing our benefit in February under the Theater Authority benefit agreement, which
That's
is nothing that would be an option for you guys, but it's a great option for some of us.
Well, we're doing these cabarets out here in Colorado, and those we're doing under a cabaret auspice. So we don't have to mess with any union affiliation, which is nice. And they're keeping us busy. It's keeping us working.
We got hand raises finally. Let's start with Mary Davis.
I have to say thank you so much. I cannot believe this. This is one of the best, because I'm working on a play that I'm taking from page to stage. It is a farce. It's 9 to 5 meets One Man, Two Governors kind of thing. We're talking about New York and London. And my question was, did you ever consider doing it at a not-for-profit? And if so, if not, why?
Did we? What was that place on? It was in the upper 50s.
Thank you.
Oh, what was that, Betsy? And it was like this. It was a small non-for-profit theater that I think we did.
I know. I don't think we ever ruled out not-for-profit. I think we were pretty open to
Yeah,
it was going to have a life.
there was a theater that I think we did something at that was a non-for-profit theater, and we did maybe like a presentation, not even a reading. And
Kind of remembering now. I'm kind of remembering that space. I feel like we had a lot of sound issues in it and stuff.
But Mary, I think we were open to everything at the time.
Okay, the last question. Giving advice to someone who's going to follow in that steps, what 3 things would you say are a must for success? I was going to say what you wouldn't do again, unless there's something that
Well,
I finally got my Barbara Walters questions. Okay.
There's one thing I will say David and I have always stuck to, and it's something that has also fueled the design world for design products, apps, technology, et cetera, which is user-centered thinking, where you put the user at the center of development. You always go back to the user. Does this work? Does this make sense? Can you find this button? Can you find this menu item? And we always went back to the audience. We would always ask ourselves, like, when we were really stuck, like, is this good? Is this bad? Should we, shouldn't we? Should we cut this? Whatever. Because you can get so attached to your material and your ego is so wrapped up in this, how can it not be? We would always really take that step back and say, what do we really think would be best for the audience's experience? What do we really think would make this the most enjoyable and make this the best paced show and the clearest show and the funniest show, whatever. And I feel like that's one thing that I'm really proud that we always did, that I do think contributed to our success, is really putting the audience first. Even when you forget to, remember to go back to it. That's one thing.
Yeah, and communicate. I mean, you as collaborators, we always communicated, and there was never a time where you put a wall up. You can't put you just got to keep working, and part of that was humor. Also, we always laughed.
Yeah, have some fun
moments during previews. Let me tell you. And
you got to be hard on the work. You got to be hard on the work, and you have to be, you have to trust, and you have to open up. And that's also hard because we found ourselves along the way opening up. I feel like we learned something from everybody, but we got knocked around a little bit too, and sometimes listen to the wrong people, and you lose track, you lose sight. So, I think you're going to have to open yourself up like anything else at some point, and it's a partnership. Be smart, be as smart as you are, is kind of the new saying that, like, somebody had said to me earlier this year about something. She said, be as smart as you are, trust yourself, but trust yourself to let people in,
Mary, are you working on this on your own?
No, Kate Danley is the writer. She's phenomenal. She wrote it. I'm the producer, marketer, everything else so far.
Communication. I mean, that is it, man. And
great.
Yeah. And it like that, I really do believe is not only just in writing, in our lives right now, because we're being so miscommunicated with on so many levels, and you see how that goes.
And where can your show be seen?
Yes.
Where can it be seen?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
The trailer park. Where can one see it?
Nowhere right now, I don't think.
And Mary, I just want to explain something, because we're used to talking about virtual presentations. They haven't done it. You haven't done a virtual. They're not close to it, but they haven't done a virtual presentation yet.
No.
This was the production. The production was a socially distanced live production at a dinner theater.
Wasn't it video though?
There's a Lincoln Center tape of the off-Broadway show, and frankly, I shouldn't say this, but I think there might be a closing night tape released online. You didn't hear that from me. Like, look it up. I don't know. I'm in this new mode too. I think in this new era we're all in, I'm kind of like, oh, F it, have at it. Let's have some fun. We'll get back to life and money soon. Yes, I don't know.
That closing night thing though, I've seen it and it is fun.
So I want to break in because we have other people waiting to ask questions. But I also want to, before I go to the raised hands, I want to say somebody asked, in order to get licensed, how many runs in New York City do you need? Can you license a show if you don't do it off Broadway or on Broadway? The answer is yes, you can do that.
Yes.
What helped, the reason it becomes a more attractive property to a licensing company if you have had a run of some length in New York. It just makes it more attractive.
It's that template issue. It's that you have a brand that has already been proven in New York. But I've learned since the Trailer Park Show, other shows that I've written, when you do reach out into the regional market, the regions are starving for new works. And after we come out of this horrible pandemic, budgets are going to be of this, that they need new work, something that they are not licensing, because the license will take away from the budgets, because their budgets are shrinking. A theater that I was going to musical direct at this past summer has had their budget slashed in half. So now you are looking at a theater that it wants a new work. It wants to develop a new work because it's more affordable, and it's also giving new content to their audiences. So the regions are going to be a real proving ground when we come out of this.
100%.
And the trick, though, is starting the relationships now, because you need to start having relationships now if you're going to be able to have a way in 6 months or 10 months.
And it's interesting you say that, because that's why we're going in to do this reading next week, so that we have something when we come out of COVID that, hey, here's this filmed reading of this new piece. Let's go. Let's start getting the interest, because it's going to be a need. It's going to be something that the regions will want.
Well, that's a heartening thing to say. So thank you for that. We're gonna next hand raise is Candy Carl. Candy, come in and sign in, please.
Yes, I have just a quick follow-up, actually. What is the number one thing that you wished you hadn't done?
That's a good question.
I don't think even the negative, I'm totally going to sound like Pollyanna, I'm so sorry. But even the negative things that we might have gone through during this process, I don't think I would trade them.
I agree. And I mean, like, you could always think, like, if we had gone left and not right, what would that have looked at? I think for me, they're smaller things, like little things where I go back and I might have lost my way as a writer underneath the weight of directing and feedback and previews. And like, maybe I look back on small things now and I'm like, oh, I should have dug my heels around. I wish I didn't change that or whatever. But I think David and I fared very well from getting a little beat up throughout that process. And I think we did well because we were so clear, we're so goal oriented about, like, as I said, like, want to get this thing up, want to get this thing legitimized, want to get this thing licensed. That led us to choose the right producers, I think, for that goal.
Also, if I may just jump in, I just want to point out that Betsy and David have achieved a very good balance between determination and collaboration. I think that those are two things that have made them successful. They haven't turned away from any opportunity that they could try to grab, but they've always been open and collaborative. I think you haven't had any problems with any of the people you've worked with.
No, but I am remembering we did switch choreographers midstream.
Right.
And I forget that sometimes, and it was amicable, but looking back, there was a top choice that I had, and she was too expensive. Okay. And there were a couple of decisions along the way where this is the one thing I did learn. I remember Jean said something about this too, about never settle, never settle, never settle. Throughout cast, she said, you never ever settle with casting. The right person will walk through the door. You have to have faith. But I think that was one thing where it's like, had I listened to my gut more, maybe I would have held out and found a different choreographer. I'm not saying anything terrible about the first choreographer. I'm just saying that when I look back, I might have been a little bit more panicky about, oh my gosh, opening night is coming, rehearsals are going to start. Like, we gotta lock this down, we gotta lock this down, we gotta lock this down. And sometimes you do have to have a little bit more faith, even if that cast member or that team member, that role is not yet filled, sit tight, listen to your gut, have faith. You want the right people.
Thank you.
Very good. Very nice. Larry Daggett.
Hey guys, thank you so much for coming. This is extremely helpful. I have a question for Betsy. I may have misunderstood. It sounds like you started out just directing it yourself, then you hired somebody to direct it, then you parted ways with the director, and then you ended up continuing directing it yourself. If that's true, what did you learn about what to look for in a director next time around?
That's a great question. So I kind of was like, I never really started as the director. It was a little bit more informal, you know, but I guess you're right. I guess I was directing it without calling myself the director. And yes, and then I learned from, it's the same thing I think I was just talking about with the team member, the cast member, is you want to click. And I think it's the great thing like about Ken McLaughlin at Stages Rep is that he had already directed the Trailer Park Musical. So when it came to the Trailer Park Christmas Musical, I knew what he did with that material. You know, you don't always have that luxury, particularly when you're working on something brand new. But I think it's honestly, it's like dating. You can like a person and you can, you know, have a nice time with the person, but it's different when you're really clicking. And that's the chemistry you find with friends, collaborators, romantic partners, whatever, you know, there's that thing. It's that thing where you feel like this is going to make not only the piece better, but all of us better. It's going to make us both better. And that's a really exciting, wonderful thing, is to feel like, I don't think I have to police this person. I think that we're going to together, you know, elevate.
So there's not a particular question that you would have asked the next time around. There's nothing specific that you would look for in a director that you wish you had thought of at the time.
No, but now that you mention it, it's a really good thing, Larry, because what I have learned actually in general is I do think it's important to talk about leadership style, because there are so many talented people out there that may or may not create the environment you want. And I've been focusing so much on creativity and tone and making it good and making it better and making a great piece and a great product, and all that stuff, of course, is what you want. But to get there, you also need a good process. And I think the environment in which you work, the culture you create, I think that might be the question I would ask next go around. If I wasn't directing and I wasn't familiar with the person, I would ask them point blank about the culture they create and the space and the creative space they create for their performers, because there is that delicate balance where you want somebody who knows how to rein things in and nudge people and get the performances that you want. But what David and I have both experienced, you know, when people are miserable, you're not going to have fun. You're not going to have good comedy. You're not going to have a good piece. So I think I think that's a valuable question to ask, is how they relate to the people they're directing and how they approach getting a great performance, or how they approach the work, the how of it all.
What actually would be very helpful then would be to seek out people that have worked with them before and ask what the process was like for them.
That's a great point.
Because the director may not be aware of the atmosphere he was creating.
Yeah, I remember asking about one director we were working with. I remember asking Rusty McGee. I don't know if you guys who know who Rusty McGee was, but I think it was Rusty McGee. I think that's his name. It's Allison Fraser's husband. He passed away.
The green, yeah.
So talented, right? And cool guy. And we were doing moon work downtown, and I was doing sketch comedy. And I remember asking about this one director. I said, "Oh, we're going to work with this person." And it was like, he didn't say anything bad, but there was this pause. And he was like, yeah. Like, that I should have listened. Like, that's to Bob's point, like, you get that response, you want to listen to that, you know, you want to look at those referrals and those responses.
So we have one more hand raised, and then I'm going to put everybody into breakout rooms because you've been behaving so well. Mm-hmm. So Ned Ginsburg, what else did you want to ask? Or is your hand still up from last time?
No, it's a new question. I was just curious if the show is being licensed by colleges. Colleges do it?
Yes, once in a while. It's not as prevalent as the smaller theaters or the like the regional market, But yes, and what they've done in some of these colleges is very interesting with the casting. So it's a little more non-traditional casting, which we love, and it's fascinating to hear what they're doing.
Well, I think it's 6:10, so it's time to wind this up. And I want to thank Betsy and David. You should come back to TRU. Bring us another show.
Thank you for having us.
We're waiting to have somebody be able to support the musical series, because we lost our funding. We were, for years, we were getting funding from NISCA and from DCA. We haven't been getting it for the last 4 years, and I finally had to stop spending money that I didn't have. So we stopped the music series, but we have the play reading series coming up, and hopefully we're going to find some support for the musical series, and people can start submitting to us again, and we can do the TRU Voices musicals reading series, and maybe we'll find the next Great American Trailer Park musical, which would be great. You guys have been wonderful. You've been very generous with your information, and I should have anticipated that we were going to get into a talk about self-producing artists, but self-producing artists is like one of the key things that we support here at TRU. So for us, it was a very appropriate discussion, and it was a great one. Thank you. At this point, I want to just remind everybody that we've been doing this for 36 weeks now, and we've been offering it for free, except that we'd really need money to keep going. We're gonna run out at some point. So if you're not a member of TRU, please consider joining us. Go to TRU Online, truonline.org/membership, all lowercase. And also, if you want to donate and help us a little bit with donations, that would be great too. Joe Nehls, Joe, are you here to put to put the URL in? Let's see if he's here. No, he's not here. Oh, damn. So I think it's TRU Donate, TRUDonate.com gets to our donation page. But the safer way, if you're not finding it that way, is truonline.org/make-a-donation. All lowercase, make-a-donation. I don't know why I did
just
that.
Put it into the chat window.
Yeah, I could. My problem is I'm multitasking. Can you'll put it in, Sandy, right?
It's already there. Even put it in.
Oh, even put it in. So the support would be appreciated. We have a benefit coming up on February 21st. I'm not going to remember everybody who's in it, but it includes Bob Cuccioli, Brenda Braxton, Jim Brochu, Katie Huffman, Ann Harada, Jana Robbins, on and on and on and on. Lauren Molina and Nick Searley. I can't say his, for some reason I have a hard time saying his name. The Skivvies, they're going to be in it well. So we've had a great lineup of people. We also are going to have appearances by Jill Pace and Tanya Pinkins, and 6 of our former TRU honorees are going to be there. And the VIP ticket, just so you know, will get you into a meet and greet afterwards, so you're going to meet a lot of the people that are in the show and working on the show. So that's it. We've gotten through another Friday gathering, and some of you I know like to meet each other, and I'm going to create breakout rooms.